Welcome to Haftarah Vayigash. We're in Ezekiel 37, starting with verse 15 all the way through verse 28. Now, Ezekiel chapter 37, that's like really quite the significant chapter. Our Haftarah starts in the middle of that chapter, but the first part of it has Ezekiel's vision of the dry bones that are in the desert. They're being brought back to life by God. And of course, this signifies the coming spiritual restoration of all Israel, as well as the resurrection from the dead that will happen in the Messianic era. Now, our Haftarah, as I said, starts in verse 15. And God tells Ezekiel to take two pieces of wood. In Hebrew, that's the word etz. And he says to join them together for a prophetic message about the reunification of all 12 tribes. Now, when the Babylonians came and exiled the southern tribes, I guess that I assumed that they did it all in one swoop. But I learned that there was actually like a first wave of deportation, and that was with the leaders of Judah, which included the king, other key leaders like Ezekiel. And that this first wave of deportation was about 11 years before the destruction of the first temple, where the rest of Judah, the tribe of Judah, was then exiled. So Ezekiel's prophecies were all given while he was living in an exile community. Some of his prophecies were before the destruction of the temple, and then some of them were given after the destruction of the temple. I think it was chapters 1 through 24 are the ones that would foretell the destruction of the temple and the exile of those remaining community at large. And then after that fulfillment, the remainder of Ezekiel's prophecies were about this future hope of redemption, but it was for the whole entire house of Israel, all 12 tribes. Now, keep in mind that at this time, the northern kingdom, which we've been talking about before, Israel, also called Ephraim, one of the sons of Joseph, they'd been in exile to Assyria for like almost 200 years. And, I do want to say that most scholars believe that the number, a large number of those from the 10 tribes actually became absorbed into Judah as they fled from the Assyrians. So not all people in the northern kingdom were deported and sent to Assyria. But at the time of Ezekiel's prophecy here, it had been about 200 years since that had happened. So his prophecy was for the restoration of all of the tribes. So like in general, Ezekiel's prophecies after the destruction of the temple, they were to talk about the hope that the dead would be resurrected, the exiles of both Judah and Israel would be regathered, and of course put back into the land under a Davidic kingship, that the temple would be rebuilt, and that God's dwelling presence would finally return to Jerusalem. The tie-in to the Torah portion this week is a little easier to find. In the Torah portion, we've got Joseph revealing his true identity to his brothers and being reunited with his family. There is so much messianic prophecy in this Torah portion. It's amazing. What we're seeing is a reunification of the tribes. And, of course, this is what our Haftarah is all about, with the fusing of those two sticks. One representing Judah, the southern tribes, and the other representing Israel, the northern tribes, and as I've said, also called Ephraim, one of the sons of Joseph. When the two sticks become one, Hebrew word echad, there will no longer be a rift between God's people. Just as in the Torah portion, this mirrors the reunification of the brothers. Now, there's a lot to this Haftarah, and with this idea of the two sticks becoming one, and there's a lot of directions that I could have gone and maybe wanted to go in this lesson, but it was a little daunting because there's actually a lot of controversy around the subject of the two sticks becoming one, and what and who they ultimately represent. And it leads into some possible directions of who are the 10 lost tribes, how will they be identified, how will they return to their identity, and probably most important, how should they relate to Judah, who's been tasked with being the leader of the tribes. Ben Adom, that's how Ezekiel is referred to in this Haftarah, Son of Man. Now, you've probably heard that before, right? It's a title for Messiah. It's actually, I think, one of his preferred ways of referring to himself. He preferred to be called Son of Man versus Son of God. So this tells us that Messiah is the one who will unite the sticks. Interesting, it's been suggested by some, you know how Torah has many, many layers, and there's many aspects to some of these themes, right? Well, it's been suggested by some that the two sticks, Ephraim and Judah, Ephraim being Joseph, right, and Judah, that they represent the two appearances of Messiah. Now, maybe at a later date I can do a short teaching on this very long-standing tradition that there's actually two Messiahs, one called Messiah ben Joseph and one called, who's the suffering servant, and Messiah ben David, who's the conquering king. This has been a belief for many, many years within Judaism. So some say that this is like alluding to this as well, and this is said because in the Torah portion we have this, I don't want to call it a confrontation, but that might be a good word. This coming together of Judah to Joseph. Judah comes to Joseph, right? So who does Judah represent? Judah represents Messiah ben David. Who does Joseph represent? Messiah ben Joseph. So we've got two personalities of the one Messiah. We've got two sticks, two personalities, two different roles of Messiah. And it's interesting, the sages teach that it's only through the unification of the two, of Messiah ben Joseph and Messiah ben David, that the redemption occurs. Well, of course, most of us here recognize that it's one Messiah and two comings, right? Without this unification between Judah and Joseph, the sages teach, the Shekinah, or Shekinah, however you want to say it, the Spirit of God, remains in exile with us. So it's only when reunification happens that the Spirit of God is no longer in exile. So there's really a lot of depth to this two-stick symbolism, and I encourage you to prayerfully study that out, because you'll learn some really, really interesting things. So much more than what I can go into here. So if we want to best understand the two sticks of Ezekiel, I think that we need to see how it relates back to the Torah portion and not get too far off on tangents that don't relate back to that Torah portion. So the brothers are reunited, right? They're no longer estranged. Ultimately, they reunite under the leadership of King Messiah, who's of what tribe? The tribe of Judah, the leader or the kingly tribe. And I think this is important for us to emphasize. I wonder, have you heard teachings that suggest that perhaps Gentiles returning to Torah might be part of the one-stick Ephraim? Now, I'm not going to get into all of that here because there's a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication and a lot of controversy. If this is your belief, then I want to encourage you to prayerfully keep this in mind. When we're talking about the two sticks, they're brothers. But which brother has been designated the ruler? Judah, right? In the Torah portion, there's something interesting that we can see in the Hebrew. When Judah, the one stick, confronts Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, to plead for leniency for Benjamin, it says he came near. Judah came near to Joseph. Vayigash, and that's the name of the Torah portion in the Haftarah. Well, the Hebrew meaning behind this is that his approach, Judah's approach to Joseph, was not subservient. He comes boldly. Why? To take responsibility for Benjamin. He comes as the representatives of his brothers, of Israel collectively. So it's in Judah's kingly role as the head of the house that he comes to Joseph, the one who he thinks is only the vice regent, but that's second to Pharaoh. So I want you to prayerfully consider that Judah has an important role to play and should be respected by all the brothers. Okay? So when you think of the two sticks becoming one under Messiah, the reunion needs to be where there's no bashing one of the other. Ephraim must not bash Judah, and Judah needs to accept Ephraim. Each must come near Vayigash with that boldness, that full assurance that none are second-class citizens. We're all brothers, though each brother has a different role to play. If it's truly a move of Messiah, then the two sticks, the brothers, will come together and not bring division. So if your experience has not been one of uniting and coming together with Judah, if it's been one of division, that might be something to prayerfully take to God and ask Him to help you sort that out. You've heard the phrase fragrance of Messiah, right? That's how you'll know that you've been in His presence. Well, that's how you'll also know that the brothers have been reunited, by the strength and might of Messiah. They'll smell alike. Remember the parable of the prodigal. It starts with the phrase, a man had two sons. Okay? So to the original audience, immediately they would have known what that meant. Immediately they would have known that that was referring to God and the divided kingdom. Interesting, right? So one son leaves to make his way in the pagan world, northern tribes, and forsakes the father's house and his ways. One stays in this father's house, Judah. Who's been in the father's house all this time? Judah. Who does Judah smell like? The father. What does the returning northern tribes smell like? the pigs, right? The prodigal worked in the world feeding pigs and then ended up eating their food. So I want you to consider that there might not be real reconciliation if the stick of Joseph or Ephraim doesn't smell like the stick of Judah. Because remember, the father has family rules, right? Judah knows these rules, and through the sages have been tasked by the father to interpret those rules. Ephraim has either forgotten the rules while living among the pigs, or Ephraim's thrown those rules off for some different ones. And that's what Hosea teaches us, right? Like the northern tribes traded God's house rules for the rules of the nations that didn't know God. And that's what sent them into exile. The one son wishing to live among the nations and live among the smelly pig slop. So here's a practice I try to do. I try to make sure that I don't inadvertently cause division where Messiah wants to bring unity. I want to prayerfully consider what role Judah plays in my life as a woman who isn't Jewish by blood, but is a disciple of a Jewish Messiah. Do I see Judah as my older and wiser brother? Or do I see Judah as an obstacle to doing what I want to do because I think it's better? Do I smell like Judah who smells like the Father? And if not, why not? Again, God has family rules, and He has set Judah as the leader. Imperfect as Judah is. Now, through Messiah, I can come into the family, but shouldn't I follow the rules? And one of these things means that I do not disrespect the sages, because they've been placed by God as the keeper of the oracles of God. Now, one example of that is in Romans 3:2, where it says, "What then is an advantage of being a Jew?" Or what is the value of circumcision? And then it goes on to say, well, first of all, they've been entrusted with the very words of God. Now, in the beginning of my Torah walk, I actually shunned Jewish things because I thought it was good to leave off what I called the man-made things of Christianity, and I didn't think then that I should also add those so-called man-made things of Judaism. I wonder if that's where you are. So I want to encourage you this week to, as you look at the Haftarah, as you look at the Torah portion, and you see this reunification of the brothers, the 12 tribes, would you prayerfully take this issue to God to see what He wants from you and how He wants you to relate to and approach Vayigash, the stick of Judah? The Haftarah ends with God's assurance that they'll dwell, they together, the tribes, the brothers, will dwell in the land, and His servant David will be their prince forever. And I know you're with me in this. I cannot wait for that day, because then Messiah will set all of this right. But in the meantime, let's ask God how He wants us to love one another and seek the fragrance of Messiah. And I'll see you next week in the next Haftarah.